has there been any conversation that you have had with with our customers with respect to technical debt? I'm really keen on knowing how people perceive technical debt and what really happens with HORUS being in the picture. How do they go about addressing this problem, the technical debt problem? Well, to bring you one reference that we have had in one of the past customer conversations is, some of the customers are not willing to bring their technical debt down because they don't have the financial clout. Now, one of the directors, in a very plain speak, told me that they would want to have HORUS help them increase their test coverage without spending any money on technical debt. Now, that was an interesting challenge. So, if there is anything that that has happened on the similar lines with you, I would like to, let the rest of the folks also know where do we stand with respect to that.
See, as you know, we have customers who are in the startup space, for whom Codebase has been relatively new. I think these are customers where technical debt is not at a stage where it should actually, where
start biting them.
Exactly, right? So it is not at a stage where it is coming to haunt back. So thankfully, those are customers that have embraced HORUS early in the cycle.
Got it.
For whom technical debt is not going to come back and haunt them, as I said earlier.
Got it.
But for some of the clients that we are talking about today, it's like fixing something as the engine is running, as they call it.
Yeah.
So what is apparently happening is, we are trying to take things from a certain point and see that, or rather say that, we are trying to showcase to them, saying that, hey, you know what, you have been in the industry for about 10 years now. There is a big chunk of code that is lying out there. There is some level of technical debt that you have. Your spaghetti code is lying out there. There are pieces of code that is not even getting executed. Your code in production, most of them is lying out there, but it's not actively being used and things like that. But the biggest challenge is, if you were to clean this up, if you were to do re-engineering and things like that using HORUS, the biggest challenge for them is, I'm not in a position today to consider this, but is there a way, can you help us do this moving forward?
Biggest reasons why these organizations which have got these, the legacy code and having a little bit of a problem addressing technical debt is the fear of regression issues cropping up in production. And one of the things that we are working on, bringing about some meaningful solution to this is, how can we come out with that set of test cases that can be put to use, so that when we have to talk about patch deployments, where if an organization is serious about bringing the technical debt down, then what they need to do is to go after a series of refactoring exercises to bring it down. Right. But for them to get the refactoring done in such a way that regression issues don't come, they need to have guarantee from the QA that tells that, hey, if you're going to deploy this particular patch, along with these 40 test cases that I have, these are all the other, X number of test cases that you can put to use that could guarantee some level of, regression coverage. And that is where I think some parts of, there is something that we are currently trying to address. The biggest challenge that production deployments have when you have to deploy, large scale code bases, fear of regression. And how much ever convincing QA has, Ops always has a problem in terms of taking up these builds. I think it is important for us to see how we can reduce the friction by increasing the coverage part, by increasing the number of test cases that we can generate. We need to see how we can work on that, but that might be an answer.
In fact, I wanted to actually kind of conclude this with a question to you. What's your thoughts for HORUS in the future, given that it is very interesting that we didn't plan it that way, but it has got into a stage where HORUS has become a one-stop shop for both QA as well as for developers today, with QA taking slightly an upper hand with the underlying metrics that engineering is using, and or rather with the engineering metrics that HORUS is providing, I should say. So what's your thoughts for the future, and where do you see HORUS in a couple of years down the line?
It's a soul-searching question, and I think to that question I'll try to be as philosophically pure as possible, based on how the world has led us right now. Given all this learning, what I strongly believe right now is to see how we can empower QA. Okay. And in the process of empowering QA, if you're going to empower the rest of the engineering organization, so be it. But what I see as a major the milestone for HORUS to go after is to see how HORUS can empower QA. there are two parts that would address the empowerment. One, how we can address the known parts. What I mean by known knowns is there are existing test cases. What is it you can do to increase the coverage on this, which is where the automatic test case generation initiative that is in the skunk works would be of some value. The other one is how we can operate on the unknown knowns. What do we mean by unknown knowns is, if I have written a test case for my API, which some person X is going to use as a dependency, he might have written some test cases for that. In a way, there is a dependency that is being established, but test case that he has written for his module might turn out to be a bunch of test cases that my model can also put to use.
Okay.
So there is a need for a system to start doing cross recommendations,
Right.
as we say, so that the coverage that a particular module can have can be improved by test cases that we have written elsewhere.
Okay.
So keeping the automatic test case generation part and also the test case recommendation, which is where the Sharpie card comes into play, if we can see how we can marry these two,
Okay.
in addition to the metrics that we kind of offer with core-based access also made available for QA, my heart says, my intuition says that the value chain, the value proposition seems to be heavily biased towards what we can offer to QA at this point in time, Vasu. I don't know where future is going to take us, but this is where at least my conviction stands right now.